The tourist thought he could do anything, crossing the line, grabbing the royal guard's weapon, and declaring it all part of his personal show. The crowd held its breath, expecting chaos, but what happened next turned everything upside down. The guard's reaction didn't just restore order, it left everyone questioning how far arrogance can go. Let's start from the beginning. The sun was doing its best to bless London with one of its rare, golden afternoons. The kind of day that makes you feel like everything is in its rightful place. At Buckingham Palace, tourists buzzed around like over-eager bees, eager to capture their perfect Instagram moment. And there, standing as still as stone, was Corporal Tommy Hayward. In his immaculate red tunic and towering bearskin hat, Tommy embodied a legacy that stretched back centuries. His expression, stoic, his posture, flawless, and his patience, unmatched. Well, until now. You see, Tommy had dealt with his fair share of nonsense on duty, the giggling teens trying to make him laugh, the occasional drunk testing boundaries, even the overly enthusiastic selfie warriors. But this guy? Oh, this guy was in a league of his own. Enter Dave. Picture this. A Hawaiian shirt loud enough to give you a headache, cargo shorts that had seen better days, and a pint of something cheap sloshing precariously in his hand. He was the kind of man who thought respect was an optional extra on a vacation package. Dave stumbled into the scene, his sunglasses sliding down his nose, sweat pooling on his forehead like he'd run a marathon. Spoiler alert, he hadn't. "Oi, mate, are you even real?" Dave's voice sliced through the general hum of the crowd, loud enough to make a few heads turn. "Do you blink? Smile? Bet you can't." The crowd chuckled awkwardly. A few tourists exchanged uneasy glances, but most chose to focus on their phones, either snapping photos or quietly recording the brewing spectacle. Tommy, however, didn't budge. Not a twitch, not a blink. His discipline was unyielding. But Dave? Oh, he was just getting started. Emboldened by the lack of response and perhaps the remnants of his third pint, he edged closer. "What's the matter, mate? Too posh to crack a grin for the paying public? Come on, I've flown halfway across the world for this." Cue the collective inward cringe of everyone within earshot. You could almost hear the unspoken thought passing through the crowd. Please stop, just stop. But of course, he didn't. He crossed the ceremonial line. The silence was shattered by a command so sharp it could have cut through steel. "Do not touch the guard!" The crowd froze. The booming voice came not from Tommy, but from a supervising officer stationed nearby. It was the kind of tone that made you straighten up, even if you weren't the one in trouble. Dave, however, didn't get the memo, or maybe he did, but his ego was louder. He smirked, wobbling slightly as he took another step forward. "Touch? Oh, I'm not just touching, I'm taking this." And with the reckless confidence of someone who's never faced consequences, his hand shot out toward Tommy's bayonet. Now, let's pause here for a second. Imagine the sheer audacity. This wasn't a prop or a piece of costume jewelry. This was a weapon, a piece of history. And Dave thought it was a souvenir. The crowd gasped in unison. A few people screamed. Phones whipped out faster than you could say bad idea. Tommy's grip on his rifle tightened. His eyes, though still fixed ahead, seemed to harden, as if silently asking, "Is this guy serious?" And that's when the tension in the air shifted. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. The lighthearted mockery had turned into a thick cloud of disapproval, a collective realization that Dave had crossed a line, literally and figuratively. As Dave's hand hovered closer to the gleaming steel, the world seemed to hold its breath. What happened next would be talked about for days, debated in comment sections, and replayed across countless social media feeds. But one thing was already clear. Dave had no idea what he was about to unleash. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Dave's hand hovered precariously close to the gleaming bayonet, his drunken confidence a stark contrast to the unyielding composure of Corporal Tommy Hayward. The crowd's collective gasp was sharp enough to pierce the heavy London air. Phones were raised, cameras rolling, anticipation building. And then it happened. Tommy moved with the kind of precision that can only come from years of rigorous training. In a swift, controlled motion, the rifle's butt snapped upward, grazing Dave's wrist just enough to knock it away without causing harm. It was a warning, subtle yet unmistakable. The kind of move that said, "You're playing a dangerous game, mate." The impact sent Dave's pint flying, the golden liquid arcing through the air in a display more dramatic than it had any right to be. It landed with a splash that was both satisfying and symbolic, as if the very universe was declaring, "Enough of this nonsense." Dave stumbled back, nearly losing his balance. The crowd? They were holding their breath, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Some even cheered softly, their admiration for Tommy's restraint beginning to overshadow their shock. But Dave wasn't done. Oh no, this was his moment, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. Scrambling to his feet, he pointed an accusatory finger at Tommy, his face flushed. Whether from embarrassment or indignation was anyone's guess. "Is that all you got?" he sneered, his voice dripping with misplaced bravado. "Come on, big guy, give me a smile. Lighten up, would ya?" It was the kind of statement that made you want to groan out loud. "Seriously, Dave? You're doubling down?" The crowd shifted uneasily, a mix of disbelief and secondhand embarrassment spreading like wildfire. Then came the sound that silenced the square, the deliberate, metallic clink of Tommy's bayonet sliding against the rifle's stock. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It was a sound that said, "This isn't a game anymore." The weapon gleamed in the sunlight, its polished blade catching the eye of everyone present. Even Dave faltered, his bravado wavering for the first time. The crowd fell into a hushed silence, their earlier amusement replaced by a palpable tension. And then, as if the universe had decided to add one final twist, a small boy's cry pierced the quiet. The child, no older than 5, clung to his mother's leg, his wide eyes filled with fear. "Mummy, why is the man being mean to the soldier?" he whimpered. The mother, her face pale, pulled him close. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "He won't hurt you." Tommy's gaze shifted ever so slightly, breaking protocol to glance at the boy. His expression softened, a flicker of humanity breaking through the stoic exterior. And then, in a low, measured voice, he did something no one expected. "It's all right, lad," he said gently, his words cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. "The guard protects." The crowd exhaled collectively, their admiration for Tommy reaching new heights. The mother's face softened, gratitude evident in her eyes. "Thank you," she mouthed, clutching her son tightly. And yet, Dave still didn't get it. Whether it was the lingering effects of his earlier pints or sheer arrogance, he refused to back down. "You're all acting like he's some kind of hero," he scoffed, gesturing wildly at the crowd. "I'm just having a bit of fun." Tommy, now fully upright and back in position, addressed him one final time. His voice was calm, but the authority in his tone was undeniable. "This is your final warning," he said, each word deliberate. "Leave now, or you'll face the consequences." The crowd murmured their approval, their disdain for Dave now palpable. Even the air seemed to carry a sense of inevitability, as if the very city was siding with Tommy. Dave, however, still hadn't grasped the gravity of the situation, and what came next would serve as a stark reminder that some lines should never be crossed. For Dave, the line between confidence and arrogance had officially disappeared. Ignoring the weight of Tommy's final warning, he lunged forward, his fingers grazing the polished wood of the rifle. It was a move so bold, so utterly oblivious, that the crowd collectively sucked in their breath. This was it, the moment where all pretense of civility had evaporated. Tommy didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't even look rattled. With the calm precision of someone who had seen it all, he sidestepped ever so slightly, a simple, calculated movement. And that's when it happened. Dave's momentum betrayed him. Unable to stop himself, he stumbled forward, his arms flailing wildly in a desperate attempt to regain balance. For one brief, glorious second, it looked as though he might recover. But gravity had other plans. Face first, Dave met the ground with all the grace of a toppled statue. The unmistakable splat of his impact echoed through the square, and a nearby puddle, a remnant of London's unpredictable weather, welcomed him with open arms. His sunglasses disappeared into the muddy water, sinking like a ship that had overstayed its welcome. The crowd, they erupted. Laughter rippled through the square, a mixture of relief, vindication, and pure, unfiltered joy. A woman near the front clutched her stomach, tears streaming down her face. "Serves him right," she exclaimed, her words echoed by a chorus of approving nods. Phones captured every angle of the incident, their lenses documenting Dave's downfall for posterity, and the internet. If Dave had any dignity left, it was now as waterlogged as his Hawaiian shirt. Struggling to his knees, he attempted to wipe the mud from his face, smearing it further instead. You can't treat me like this," he sputtered, his voice cracking under the weight of his embarrassment. And then, as if doubling down on the absurdity, he added, "I'm American." Cue the collective eye roll from the crowd. "Oh, Dave," their faces seemed to say, "that excuse doesn't work here." Tommy, ever the professional, had already returned to his position, his rifle back at his side, his posture impeccable. He looked as though the entire spectacle had barely registered. But then, in a moment that would go down as pure cinematic perfection, he reached up and adjusted his bearskin hat with deliberate care. Was it a smirk that flickered across his lips? Perhaps. The crowd certainly thought so, their cheers reigniting as they applauded his restraint and his subtle yet triumphant gesture. Meanwhile, Dave's day was about to get worse. Local authorities, alerted by the commotion, arrived swiftly. They approached him with the kind of stern efficiency that left no room for argument. "You're done here, mate," one officer said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Dave, still soaked and sputtering, was escorted out of the square, his protests drowned out by the crowd's jeers. As he disappeared from view, a new sound filled the air, the unmistakable chime of notifications. Videos of the incident were already flooding social media. Hashtags like #RoyalKarma, #TouristFail, and the more creative #Puddlegate began trending within minutes. The internet, as it often does, had claimed another victim. The day ended, much as it had begun, with Corporal Tommy Hayward standing tall at his post. But now, the atmosphere had shifted. The crowd wasn't just there to take pictures or marvel at tradition. They were there to show their respect, their admiration for a soldier who had upheld his duty with dignity and grace. Applause rippled through the square, the kind of spontaneous, heartfelt reaction that transcends language or culture. And though Tommy didn't acknowledge it, protocol after all, there was a sense that he felt it. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the palace grounds, one thing was clear: some lessons come with a splash of reality. And for Dave, well, he'd just become the latest reminder that tradition isn't something to be trifled with.